let me start then with Chad, because Noah just got through talking. So I'm gonna go to Chad. Chad, whatever you have, whatever analysis you have, help bring me up to speed, and then I'll take it from there, and then Noah, and then anyone else, and then I'll jump in. Go for it.
Cool. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to respond to what Anoa said, and get people to realize one important thing. The Democratic Party nomination contest is it's where the Democrats get together and decide, okay, who's going to be the captain of our football team as we go into the November election. Okay, the fact that we have caucuses in some states and primaries in other states, it's a critical point because, and there's so much history that goes into it, but ultimately you got to realize the Democratic Party is trying to get together and decide who our champion is going to be to compete against the Republican in November. You know, party nominee is not a government position. And I've got people here locally in Washington that want to use the primary instead of the caucuses because they believe in democracy. They believe in one person, one vote. And it's like, okay. And then I've got something that Kelly, Nessa's partner, sent me a little bit earlier, where the Nevada GOP youth were saying there's nothing preventing anybody from attending and participating in both the Democratic and Republican caucus processes. And it's like, what? No, if you do that, you're lying to yourself. Because what are you trying to do? All you're trying to do is mess up the system. So the fact that we've got so low turnout in most elections, so many people identifying as independents, it blurs the lines between what reality is and what people's understanding of reality is. One of the points that I see from ABC News is looking at the exit polls, and it says Nevada Democratic Caucus, no matter who you are supporting today, do you usually think of yourself as a Democrat, Republican, or independent or something else? Democrat is at 78%, Republican at 1%, independent or something else at 20%. So 20% of the people who are polled for this number, regardless of what the sample size is, were independent. They were not Democrats until they decided to participate. And like Noah said, most of those people are supporting Bernie Sanders. So the Democrats and what people that I hear talking call the quote-unquote Democratic establishment, what they're saying is, this is the Democratic Party trying to choose a nominee, and we've got 20% of the people participating who were not Democrats before this contest. I don't understand. You know, I can understand the concern, and I can understand the narrative on that. So my answer is twofold. To the independents who are just now getting involved, please be patient with us. You are not finished changing our party yet.
Right.
Okay? And that's the mentality you have to have. You're going into a meeting where people have been involved for 10, 20, 30, maybe 40 years, and you're saying that we have been doing it wrong for that entire period of time. Is that really the most effective way to have your voice heard? Because that's going to turn people off. To the Democrats who are saying those kinds of things, I say this: nobody lasts forever, and what we are borrowing today is the world of our children. So maybe our kids, maybe people who have not been involved before, should have a chance to have their voice heard in our party. Encourage them to get involved. Encourage them to stick around through an entire election cycle, through an entire election season and beyond, and teach them the rules, show them the history, and give them the context to say, this is what worked for us. in the 60s
Mhm.
when both John Lewis and Bernie Sanders were fighting hard in their own way for civil rights, in the 70s when the women's rights movement came up, in the 80s when Stonewall came up and was so strong for the gay and lesbian community. All of these things, there's a history that comes with activism and people getting involved. We need to respect that history, and we need to move into the future. Everybody who wants to be involved in the Democratic Party should be welcomed with open arms, listened to, and then given the context to really be effective on what they want with what they want to do. And I could go on for hours, as this could probably tell you.
No, I actually I appreciate. So you bring a perspective that I think is critical. I only alluded to it on my show, and I asked you about it while I was still in transit. But you bring a perspective that I appreciate because it's really a question of how do you take the reality of our two-party system, I believe single district representative democracy, by virtue of Diverger's law, we can pretty much guarantee that it's going to remain a two-party system. And so long as these two parties are entrenched and they have access to fundraising and the political reins, it's going to be hard to unseat one of these parties. Therefore, if we are dissatisfied with one of these parties, then we need to change from the inside one of these parties instead of just sitting on the periphery and complaining about how this party is no longer progressive.
Right.
That being said, everything that you just described is really the reality, right? Everyone who is a staunch progressive, we need to be that much more involved on the local level, and we need to. I'm not really opposed to being more. I'm not afraid of making someone upset or hurting someone's feelings or saying something that might turn them off. However, if you're going to do that and not follow through by actually being active on the local level, then all you're doing is running your mouth and turning them off as you're running your mouth. So what incentive do they have to actually listen to you or to work with you or to try to incorporate the changes if all you're going to do is insult them and not be active? None
Right.
whatsoever. But if you want to bring a criticism, and even if that criticism is valid, you can bring it to them, but if they see you being active and a part, then that criticism can become more than a critique. It can become a radical change on the local level. So all of that to say, I absolutely agree with you, and I think people who are dissatisfied with the way politics works has to work politics to change it, and we can't negate that. We can't negate that. We can't minimize that. That's what I want to say. We cannot minimize that whatsoever. I want to point out a couple of polls.